And so for the example I gave, I feel like it definitely elicited this learning in the students, because they felt supported and they were not alone while trying to accomplish these tasks. And because there was some guidance from me as a TA during these extra office hours, there was enough support for them to not only troubleshoot but also learn even more things that they would normally do in I guess in the normal schedule for the class.
So, from my experience, I feel like there's a definite divide between the teaching staff and students. So, I felt like humanizing myself allowed them to bridge that divide and open space for discourse and easily open them up to conversations. They were respectful of each other and their differences, as well as, their interactions was just amazing to see. The students were more comfortable and it allowed them to be more interactive and more engaging. And as their TA, it was exciting to see such an inclusive world being fostered, knowing that with this inclusive mindset, students can succeed and contribute to one, a global economy, and two, developing international competencies, starting in the form of communication and acceptance of differences.
This is an interesting one because this is not strictly a question in supply chain management, but it's also a question in ethics, for example, in human resources. So it cuts across multiple fields, which students enjoy because in real life there are no textbook type problems that come from the end of a chapter. So students like to be put in the hot seat, if you will. They like to be the manager or the executive, or to consider themselves as the decision-making authority. Should we partner with this textile facility? I keep going back to that. This textile facility in Southeast Asia, recognizing full well that while it may be standard for that part of the world, the working conditions remain below the Canadian standard. Is that an okay thing to do? Again, students like it when there is no perfect answer to the problem. It's very real life. So the discussion doesn't end at the ring of the bell at the end of class, so to speak. When they go home and continue discussing it, and again, there is no perfect answer, they're preparing themselves for those very difficult situations 10, 20 years into the future of their career.
So once you sow the seeds, you hope that whatever ends up blooming in place then spreads, right? And the seeds then spread. And so I think especially in education, that's what we hope will happen, is that students in particular will take those seeds and they'll spread them, and they'll take this on in their own work. But I've also noticed it in terms of, working with international students, for example. I think it does make a difference when they can see that you're open to other ways of knowing in your classes, right? That it's not just about here are Western ways of knowing, that there are other ways that we can bring in, especially I think in education, because the one thing our system has shown us is that this is not a decolonial way of knowing what we're currently engaged in, right? Through a colonial institution. And we may not be able to decolonize the institution itself, but we can create spaces within the institution, I think, where we encourage other ways of knowing to flourish. And so maybe a little part of that, of creating those spaces for other ways of knowing to flourish within the institution.
One thing that I have noticed in the past couple of years is that all of my students of all backgrounds in all programs are thinking a lot more critically about where history comes from. They're a lot more open to this idea of history being constructed, the difference between historical fact and historical interpretation, the idea that something that they read has omissions and silences. And I use the term the silences in the archive, and they love it. They latch onto this and they use it in their exams and so on. But the idea that there are silences, that there are voices that are missing. and that they can help write this new history, including the voices. I don't think that's just me. I think this is a change in our student population. I think it's coming up from the secondary schools as well, which is very good, which is very, very encouraging. Another really nice change that I think has come from this curriculum is interaction between professors at the dance school. For the first 3 years, I co-taught the course with a drama professor. Then when it went online, I got to rethink it all again. Now I'm solo teaching, but I have guests come in. I also keep open communications with whoever teaches the winter course. Plus, we all communicate with people who teach the second year courses, which are more focused on music history for the music students. So that's, I think, a really meaningful change, because often in university teaching, we tend to think we ought to be autonomous. This is my course and I'm teaching it in my way, rather than communicating across disciplines and across years of study. And also pulling in what the students are learning from exam answers and also from student evaluations. Another meaningful change for the students is that these courses that have allowed me to blend musicology and ethnomusicology, and also dance and drama as well, I can give the students wide open topics for their final projects. So I'm able to invite students to research something that they want, that they see as valuable to them, whether it's their education and their future, whether it's looking into their own cultural background, whether it's researching something that they've just suddenly become really, really excited about, like what happened in medieval Andalusia, and they've never even heard of that term before, and suddenly they're able to go into a place, a part of the world, a time in the world, and find out completely new things.
So one of the impacts that I saw directly was from this 45-minute session that I had where I was explaining curricula from different parts of the world. And I knew students were interested in this because they kept asking questions, not only directly after the session, but in the weeks following it as well. They were very, very interested in finding out more, and also asked questions along the lines of, well, why don't we have that here? In a lot of the elements that I was talking about, they were asking, why don't we adopt that here in our education system?
I think students do better, so to speak. It's about redefining success, and success being more than just grades in these, and that it's not all success is an objective measurable. And for students to feel some ownership over the classes, that they were really part of something, part of building community. And in smaller programs, and I've been very fortunate, my entire education trajectory has always been in smaller learning cohorts. And that has really helped me feel a sense of community and learning and joint success in the classroom, both as a student and as an instructor. It's a process, and it's not just, it's a process change.
I do think like that that experience I talked about, using the talking circles, for example. I think that, to be explicit about it, I think that it's important to ground any of the work we're doing in global engagement in the local Indigenous context we're living in. So for me, I think that was a really important learning just in terms of my own pedagogy. Number one, that, I don't have to be the only person offering feedback to students, that actually that process of co-learning from each other was so much more valuable, even for, an assignment. And they actually got so much more out of that process than they would have by just providing me with an answer. And the truth of the matter is, even if a student didn't maybe put as much effort into their original response, just by the nature of listening to their peers, right? I think what they came away with was so much more robust and so much more complex when thinking about this question of what is literacy. And asking them to hold this question while they went on a walk, for example, was also a way of getting them to, connect to the land on which they're on.